Hi, I'm Susan Hirsch, and I would like to share today with you some techniques that I have been using with powders and a silkscreen. Now, I have a previous video out where I show how to use powders to create a real even and beautiful gradation, such as this. But what I'd like today is expand a little bit about the techniques that I've discovered you can do with the silkscreen. It's kind of exciting. So, first of all, one thing I did want to mention was when you're using powders for safety, be sure you always wear some kind of a respirator or a dust mask. It's extremely important. Now, what I'm going to show you with one of my favorite images here, which is a telephone pole, is how creating the backgrounds using a screen, silk screen, and sifting can give you some really beautiful varied techniques. Now, you can see here, I've got the telephone image in several ways. This one is already fired in layers, and you can see that there's a very rich, deep, stormy look created with the ultramarine blue and or aquamarine blue. And then there's a really light bit of yellow here, which kind of gives you that stormy precursor to a storm. So if you'd like a light and sunny version or a more dramatic version, this gives you lots of options. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here is how much different the image, when it's separated, is going to look on some of these different backgrounds. As you can see, if you want to create a horizon line and a sun or a moon, is another cool thing that we can do with the screen. Here is just more of a basic abstract sky bleeding down into ground. And again, they're very abstract until you put a realistic image over it, like this. And then suddenly your mind tells you, oh, well, that's the ground and that's the sky and that's haziness or sunniness. And it's just really fun to add such interesting effects to your work. So here I'm also going to demonstrate that, as you can see here, I've created a moon that the birds in my telephone pole image can fly across, and then I added a little bit of black up here to give it extra drama. Then here, if you were wanting something more like a beautiful sunset, you can go into the yellows and oranges. It just totally opens up all kinds of options. This one, again, is a little simpler, a little less dramatic, but very sunny and pretty. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you exactly how to achieve these techniques with your silkscreen and your powders. So I'm going to remove these. I do have another example I'd like to share, and that is when you're doing multiple layers like this, it's especially nice. You can see what great depth this adds. Here I have an image of some birch trees and a wolf, and you can see that the ground and then the moon and the sky as he's howling, and then adding another layer that comes forward is going to create a great deal of depth. So I'm going to be doing a 5-layer project as a webinar with Art Glass Magazine this summer, so you might want to look out for this. But this is a free tip that you're going to get ahead of time on how to create the background. So when we start with this, again, I can't reiterate enough about using a dust mask. I'm going to put my dust mask on. Whenever I work with powder, it's a very important element. Now, I've put a plain piece of paper down, and I'm actually on a light box. I'm not going to turn it on for this particular demonstration because you can see better the top surface without it. However, it helps if you are trying to place your image. Then I'm going to take a piece of paper. This is a tabloid size paper, and I've actually drawn around it the area that, that I'm going to use. Then I'm going to take a white piece of glass, which is my base. I like to use white because even the most subtle colors will pop off of that. Now, because the white on white is hard to see when I'm working with a screen, usually I'll do a drawing around it. Sometimes I'll even kind of mark the areas that I might want to see a horizon line or so forth. And then I'm going to take and put a base here. This is going to be my parking space, and you'll see what I mean. This is kind of a dance where it takes multiple steps. Then I'm going to take a double thick or a thicker piece of glass, and I'm going to set that down on my paper. This is my catch paper, and put my background glass there. Then I'm going to take my silk screen. Now, in the past video, I showed you that I used an actual silk screen that I had purchased from the art supply store and taped the edges because it makes it easier to sift. But today I'm going to use one of my own custom screens. And the reason I started making my own screens is the silk screen works fabulously, but after about 15 uses, you'll start to see little pinholes in your screen, which I found to be a bit frustrating. So I decided to order a stainless steel screen and created my own, and I added little elevator feet to make it easier. So we're going to use the steel screen. So I'm going to start by getting the powder out. Now I'm using a mat, just a piece of mat board, a simple piece of mat board that I've cut for a narrow and for wide sifting back and forth. This way, if I want to get a nice even layer, I can do the whole color here. If I want more effects, I can use the narrow edge. So we're going to start out with some greens because we want to create kind of a green and blue. I'm going to put this down here so you can kind of see what our goal is. That one I had made yesterday, and then I fired it. So we're going to start with the greens. I'm going to put a little bit of moss green down here. Now I put the powder to the side here. I'm not putting it over the area where my image is going to go because I don't want it to sift through there. Then, now on this green, I want to get a more even distribution of the powder. So I'm going across nice and evenly, like this, just to get kind of that base color in the lower area. Okay, then I pick up the screen. This is the step thing that you get used to. It's kind of like a dance. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Pick up the screen, tilt it. Okay, tap it, dump all of the powder out because we don't want that contaminating the next color. Then I pick up my piece and gently put it on the parking space. This way it keeps that safe. This thicker piece of glass makes it easy for me to pick up and not leave fingerprints. Now I try to only have one color open at a time because I'm notorious about putting it back in the wrong jar if I have multiple jars open, and that is definitely, you're not going to want to contaminate your powder. Okay, so next we're going to start again by putting the glass down, taking our base, and then bringing the screen back. Now I'm going to use a dark opal green because I want to add a little bit of drama. It kind of puts a little bit of detail in right here. And you can see, you know that the powders are so much lighter when they're in powder form than how they mature. You're going to want to make sure that you use a color chart or something so you can tell what your final result is going to be. Now on this one, I'm going to use the screen a bit differently. I'm going to kind of create this wave pattern. And by doing the wave pattern, I'm going to get a different look. It's going to be very streaky. As you can see, that's quite a bit different than if I'm just going across straight. Now I'm going to take this again. You can see the powder flying off of here, which is why you're wearing that dust mask. Okay, dump it, all the excess again, because I'm going to go into the blues after this, and I don't want the green in my work. So again, this allows me to pick it up carefully without putting my fingers in it to move this. Then I'm going to take my green jar and recycle. Again, make sure you get the most powder off of this sheet as you can so you don't contaminate your next color. Now we're going to move on to the blues. Okay, so I'm going to place this here, come back, replace my base glass, get my screen back up. Now this time this time I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little cutout circle and put it here because I'd like to have kind of a moon or sun look like I did in this other one. So I'm going to leave that on there for these colors. I'm going to start with the lightest. You're always going to want to start with the lightest color because if you try to do light over dark, it's pretty much going to get overpowered by the darker color. And you can also start on both sides or either side with the color depending on how even, you may want the sift. And again, if you want a kind of a more straight color, you're going to sift straight across like this. And being that this is the lightest of the colors, I'm going to go ahead and do that first. Okay, now I've left a nice bit of white in between, which will add a little bit to the drama. Again, tap your screen, knock the powder off of the screen itself and out of the frame. And you can see that after you've sifted, what's left on the screen is the slightly heavier or thicker pieces. Okay, so I'm going to take this now, put it back into the blue. Give yourself lots of space because you're going to need it so you don't bump into the different elements, and so you can do this very strategically. Okay, now because I have that kind of more white area in the middle, I think I'm going to add a pastel orchid just to give me a little tone down here. So again, I'm going to pick up the screen and I'm using a orchid opal because what I'd like to do is just create a little bit of really pretty color here in the middle. Okay, leave that there. Come over. Now this is going to be pretty subtle in how you see it on the screen, but it should show up a little bit in the middle. So that's just to add a pretty light orchid. Now you can see, as I tap the screen, you can see that the orchid is going over the blue, but what's going to happen when it fires is that blue is going to overtake the orchid. So you'll probably only see the orchid in the lightest of the areas. And keep that in mind. If you're starting with a deep color and then you're sifting lots of light colors over it, you're not going to see those light colors because the dark color is going to overtake it. Okay, so place it back up here. We're going to pick up and dump the orchid back into the jar. And then we're going to put some real dramatic streaks in the sky. Okay. Now, put it back down again. Don't forget to put your piece of thick glass down so you can reach around here without touching the edges. And remember, I've put this little circle on here to create kind of a moon or sun. Okay, now I'm going to move into a darker color. I've got dark blue opal over here. I'm going to put my screen out. It's easy to forget what step you're on, so you kind of have to remind yourself. Okay, now this is a lot richer blue than the light blue, so I'm going to go a little easier on it. Now what I'd like to do is create streaks. So to create the streaks and to create the pattern, I'm actually going to do some waves. Now I'm going to sift it together like this, so when I come across it, you'll be able to see some distinct wave lines. Very pretty. Now, because I ended up with kind of a bigger spot down here, I'm going to bring that back down, and I'm going to do one down across here to kind of balance out that area. Okay? Now, although this looks like it's completely covered, it actually will show up really nicely as streaks. Again, let's dump the color out of the screen. Pick up our piece, and then we're going to do our final dramatic step. Okay, this is going to go back into the big jar. There. And then the final step is going to be a deep aventurine blue, which is really rich. And it also has a little bit of sparkle in it, which is fun. Okay, now on this one, we're going to take an extra step now because I'd like for that to cross over my sun. So I'm going to carefully pick up the sun, place it over here. As you can see, that left a really nice big white circle. So put my screen back on, because this one I do want to have come over the moon. We're going to call it a moon in this particular case. Okay, you're going to have to be really light on this one because this one is a very rich and dark color. So again, I'm going to kind of be careful about how much and where this is going to cross. Isn't that pretty? Now, if I'd like, I can also put a little bit of that just a little over here because I want it to cross over the moon. Gives it a little special drama. So again, I'm going to assemble it here because you can see it's pretty dark. And now I'm going to bring these streaks across the moon. Wow, that is very fun. And I think I'll add just a little bit up here at the top. The more that you work with this and the more that you manipulate the powder around the screen, the better feel you'll get for what you're going to see from the different shapes and movements. But I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's a really nice illustration of what I want to get. So at this point, I'm going to clean up. Again, I'm going to set it up here on the parking space and pick up the extra color. Now, if you accidentally get two colors mixed in here, like when I picked up this little moon, had I dumped that, I might be inclined to want to put that into a mixture. So if I get some contaminated color, I'm going to put it in its own jar. I hate to put mixed color back into any of these because I like to keep these as pure as possible. Obviously, I am dumping some things back, but I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible. So what we've got here now, I want to show you side by side, is we've got an example of how it looks dry. I call it dry or not fused. And then a piece that I did yesterday that's a very similar look and how that looks fused. Because you can see that the colors, especially the greens, really mature. So hopefully you will enjoy using this technique. If you have any questions, you can email me. I'll have that on my website, which is firefusionstudio.com. So thank you.